I hope that you are ready and somewhat prepared for inflation, because it seems like we're definitely headed that way. It's not something we haven't seen in the past, but it's something that you may not have personally seen. And inflation is going to a point that we haven't actually seen since the 1980s. So most likely you haven't seen anything quite like this. Inflation tends to run about 2% a year. It's forecasted to be about 2.4% for this year and then go down to 2.2 next year. So hopefully this doesn't actually happen, but in terms of hyperinflation, this may happen where prices could increase 15%, 20%, 30%. We don't know. But so far we've seen the price of gasoline, coffee, lumber, metal, all of your groceries and corn increase rapidly. So, it's more expensive to fill up your tank. It's more expensive to build your house. I had just finished part of my basement and I had been buying plywood sheets and they were like $13 a sheet last year. I just checked at Home Depot yesterday and the sheets were $48. This is just an example of the kind of inflation that we're going to be going to. And, are you prepared? What can you invest in? How do you know that there's inflation? What are some of the experts saying? What's the news kind of saying? So that's kind of what I want to get into today. So what does inflation mean? It actually means that there's too much money in the system for too few goods. So too much money chasing too few goods. So, the problem that we have is our money is fiat, meaning that the actual dollars and change, and most of it's digital now, doesn't have a tangible value to it like it did whenever we were on the silver, the gold standard with gold and silver. So you can't just exchange a dollar and you know that it's backed by a certain amount of gold. Our dollar is just a promise from the government saying that it has value. And we accept it between one another. We accept it between countries saying that the American dollar is worth this much. So we tend to just accept that. But what happens when we continue to pump too much money into the system and there aren't enough goods for us to purchase? Well, that's when prices really start to drive up. It's almost like everything goes up for auction. And you'll see that people are willing to spend more because they have more money. You got to think about what we've been doing over the past year. There have been so many people receiving financial aid and these checks just coming into the mail for each couple, each individual, each couple, and each child are receiving all this money. And not everybody actually needed that money. Not everyone lost those jobs that a lot of people did during the year. And a lot of people did need help. But some people didn't need help, and yet they still received these massive checks. So what did they do with these checks? Did they spend it on goods, or did they invest it, or are they just sitting on it? It's a combination of all of it. And another thing that's happening, we've decided that we're going to start taxing more people, taxing corporations like Big Corp. So we're saying that, Big Corp isn't paying their fair share. Who do you think works for the big corporations? Do you think that there's anybody that's not in the top 1% that works for these corporations? Who do you think is going to be actually paying the tax? It's going to be the middleman. It's going to be the middle class that's going to be paying those taxes. So anytime that they talk about big corporation taxes and not being fair, once they increase those taxes, you're the one that's going to be paying for them. You're either going to be paying for it in terms of more expensive goods, or your paycheck's just going to be less because the company's going to be taking it out of your paycheck in order to pay the huge taxes. So either way, you're going to be paying for it. If you're a customer or an employee, you'll be paying for it. In terms of inflation itself, that's kind of a tax. So your spending power each year decreases by about 2%. So you've got $100, next year it's only worth $98. The next year after that it's worth less than $96. So what does that actually mean? Well, it's kind of like a tax that you're paying so that we can pump more money into the system. Now, recently we've been told that we're going to be pumping in trillions of dollars in addition to the system. I mean, we already have over a $17 trillion debt in this country, and now we're going to be pumping that up by 5, 6, 7 trillion, maybe even $9 trillion here very soon. So what do you think is going to happen once we pump in trillions more dollars that are chasing too few goods. Just to kind of put things into perspective of what $1 trillion is. So you can't really fathom how big that number is. So an example is 1,000,000 seconds. So say $1 million, you convert it to seconds. 1,000,000 seconds is equivalent to about 11.5 days. 1 trillion seconds is equivalent to 31,700 years. So that's a big number. And we're talking about not just 1 trillion, but we're talking about 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 trillion dollars that is going to be pumped into the economy. And it seems like, everyone's just going to have more money and more money and more money. All it's going to do is if you have any money right now, it's just going to be worth way less. And everything's just going to become more expensive. So this new money that you're going to be receiving isn't worth as much. Your dollar today is going to be worth less tomorrow in terms of buying power. So what's in the news? So Warren Buffett is saying that he's seeing substantial inflation already. So he's backing this up because he's saying that he's raising his prices and consumers are just accepting it. And his stock's going up too. So he's not losing any type of customer at all. So everything that he's doing, he's increasing the price, passing it on to the consumers, and they're accepting. And he said that he's going to be continuing to have to increase those prices. So there's an example of inflation right there. And Warren Buffett has lived through a lot of different types of inflation. So if he's saying that there's going to be inflation, there's probably going to be inflation. So also what's going on is Bank of America is saying that they're seeing all signs are pointing to higher inflation. So now that the big banks are saying that there's going to be inflation, what do you think is going to happen with interest rates? Like, are they going to be going down? Are they going to be going up? How are they going to combat inflation? What are we going to be doing here? We want people to still continue to invest their money. We just hope that everyone just doesn't start to kind of panic and buy everything in sight, because we know that inflation is going to be coming, because that's just going to exacerbate the issue. So what can you do as just a regular employee, a consumer, or an investor? Like, what types of things can you invest in? And the solution for you would be to buy tangible goods. So are you going to be needing gasoline? Are you going to be needing metal? Are you going to be needing wood or lumber? Are you going to be needing, various types of groceries that are going to stay on the shelf for a long time? Toilet paper, that's another example of something that, is a consumer good that people are always going to want to need. The problem here is that you shouldn't go out and just hoard everything, because that is going to increase the problem. That's going to decrease the number of goods for people to actually buy the goods that you actually need. But just buy what you need. Don't try to buy it and then make a profit off of this scenario with the tangible goods. It's just going to really, really intensify this problem. So as far as investments that you can make, there's bonds. So during times of high inflation, these tend to be more stable than other types of investments. So there's something called TIPS. You can look those up. They're government bonds that are kind of protected under inflation. How do they do during hyperinflation? People don't know, because we haven't had any type of hyperinflation. We've seen hyperinflation in Germany, where people were bringing like literally wheelbarrows full of cash in order to buy just one loaf of bread. Are we going to get to that point? Hopefully not, but no one has ever seen this type of spending before. So what else can you buy? So like I said, commodities, your tangible commodities, but also commodity stocks. I mean, you can buy holdings in corn, wheat, coffee, sugar, all of those kind of commodities. Of course, it's not tangible, but it is an option if you're buying just stock worth of things. Say that you think that the price of wheat's going to be going up, you could buy it for, I don't know, $10 a share today, and maybe it's going to be worth $20 next year. That's, that'd be good for you to have more money. Of course, your money's going to be worth less, and the price of wheat's going to be skyrocketing. So you're going to be injured here, but you're also going to benefit in a different way, in a financial way. So again, hopefully we're not going to be seeing that type of inflation, but all signs are pointing to a source of inflation. Warren Buffett, Bank of America, other resources are saying that this is going to be happening. Another thing that you kind of need to be aware of is dividend stocks. So in terms of high inflation, dividend stocks usually get hammered during this time. So you want to be looking to invest in companies that you think are they're going to be able to increase their prices and consumers are going to continue to accept those prices. So something like Apple. If Apple has to increase their already super high prices, are consumers going to continue to buy their products, or are they going to be switching to Microsoft, a cheaper solution? Are other companies that you can think about are ExxonMobil. You know, is gasoline going to be, it's always going to be necessary for now. I know we're trying to get off of gasoline, but that is so far down the road unless there's something that comes out and bans gas all in general. But for now, maybe that would be something that you could look at. Maybe different lumber companies, maybe like Home Depot or Lowe's, because those are type of stores that are always going to be needed in order for, you know, your home improvement projects. So those are the type of companies that you may want to be looking at, and maybe not look at something like GameStop anymore, or other companies that people aren't necessarily going to be investing in when they don't think that company is going to possibly stay around. So I hope that this kind of provides you some insight as to what's going on in the world of inflation today, in the world in general, and different ideas about what you may need to be purchasing. Again, don't go out and hoard these items. Go out and buy your fair share, the items that you need, and just keep those, because you got to think, if you're able to buy your groceries right now for a week for $100, what if they cost $200 next week? So what can you buy right now that you know that eventually you're going to be using? You know, cans of tomatoes or cans of other fruits and vegetables or meats that you can freeze, different things like that. Just buy what you would normally share. Don't purchase things like people were doing with toilet paper for $10 and then trying to resell it for $100. You saw what that did. And it caused just mad rushes. You couldn't find it anywhere. We don't want to do that to all consumers where everyone's hoarding everything. So just buy your own fair share. And we will make it through this. We just need to make sure that we don't lose our minds. So I hope that this provided some insight. If it did, hit subscribe. I'll be sharing more videos about this. I'll also be going over more current events that are going on. And I'm just hoping that this kind of helps you out. I appreciate your time, and I'll see you next time.